Hey everybody, you are in the talk, Performance Starts at Boot. I'm going to be talking about performance, and I'm going to be talking about it from the perspective of inside out, which is a term that I sort of made up. But you can find a copy of these slides on SpeakerDeck if you want to follow along there. Otherwise, follow along here. So I made up this term outside in development. I think most of us approach performance where we first think of it as sort of like production customer experience performance, where you have your application performance monitoring, you have your real user metrics, you're fixing N+1s and database performance, and you're sort of starting with your user, which is good. Keep doing that. As you sort of like move down a little lower, maybe you're thinking about like your production boot performance, and this has implications for like your operations, your deploy cadence, resiliency. And then down at the bottom, the inside out development is like your experience as a developer, writing code, running code, reloading code, and how quickly that happens and how quickly that you can move through that. So I want to be talking about development boot and code reloading performance from your perspective. So this is something that comes up a lot. I have a whole folder of screenshots of people that are having trouble. So this is somebody in the Nate Berkopeck's Rails Performance Slack that was just sort of like, hey, our server has all these weird little hiccups. Like, are we just loading too many links? And this was actually a code reloading problem, and code reloading was really slow. My goals for this talk. I want to convince you, first and foremost, that this is like really important, interesting work, satisfying work, and you should do it. So if you're here, hopefully I can convince you. I want to give you just one big picture principle that will help you make your development experience lightning fast. And then I'm going to help you identify some really terribly ways that developers mess all of this up. About me, I'm the author of Good Job, which is a active job backend for Ruby on Rails. I'm currently the co-founder and CTO of Front Door Benefits. We partner with grocery stores to help their customers enroll and manage their SNAP, EBT, food stamp, welfare benefits. Formerly, I was a manager of GitHub's Ruby architecture team. I'm based right here in San Francisco, and I am looking for people to become cat fosters and forever homes for cats. And so if you stick around till the end, we got cat photos. All right. This was an example from github.com, the github.com Ruby on Rails monolith, doing development on Ruby on Rails monolith at GitHub. It would take 9 seconds to boot. So every time that you ran a unit test, it would take 9 seconds that you'd have to wait for before it would ever even get to the point of running your test. If you wanted to start the Rails server, if you wanted to open up the Rails console, you would have to wait 9 seconds. That really sucks. Obligatory XKCD. If you can shave off 1 second and you're running that 50 times a day over 5 years, but like you can spend like, that will be a day's worth of time. So if you spend a day making that better, it's worth it. All of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today, because this is commands that you're running during development all the time, you're sort of in this sweet spot of this upper corner where it's actually like, oh, you are netting out positive. And if you think of a company like GitHub, which has about 1,200 developers working in Ruby every day, we're not just talking about these commands being run 50 times a day for one developer. We're talking about it being run 100,000 times a day for that entire development organization. So important. Here I am trying to convince you to do this work. I think this work is really easy because all of this is happening on your local development machine. You don't have to convince anybody that they should install an APM or that they have to ship logs or profiles. This is all things that like you're just doing on your local laptop, local development machine. So it's really easy just to like get started. If you're already booting your Ruby application on your machine, like you can do this work. I think a lot of this work is overlooked. You're not going to be competing with other people on your team to do this work. I have a thesis, which is I think people just have low expectations for this that I think people take where they're like, well, Ruby is slow. My application is really big. This is just the way things are. And so nobody is actually being like, you know what, actually, we can make this a lot better. I really think this work is satisfying. This is why I feel like I have come to specialize in this place in performance. The domain isn't super wide, but like you can kind of drill down from application down into Ruby. I think there's a lot of interesting code design sort of challenges. I think it's really intellectual. And also this work is like measurable. A lot of the things I want to be showing you today are like performance profiles that you can just like give a number and be like, look, I cut off this much amount of time. This work is social. You're going to be working across your application. If you have a really big engineering org, you're going to be working across teams. A lot of this stuff cuts down into open source gems and libraries that you're using. So if you are looking for like having broader impact, I think this sort of work is right there. And lastly, like this is work for you. You get the benefits of this work. This makes your lived daily experience better. To do it, I think you all deserve a treat. Okay, and now why all the cons? I will be honest, they're all of those same ones, just sort of like in reverse. Nobody is asking for this work. Your product manager, your engineering manager probably is not going to come to you and be like, I need you to make the application run faster in boot for your development. And because you like may have to make code changes across things inside of your company, inside of your teams, in open source, there are other people that may also be like, no, I don't want to make that change. And so yeah, like there are downsides here. I want to be really clear, but I think the upsides outweigh all of that. All right, this example, again, why the heck was it taking 9 seconds to boot? When we profiled it and we looked at it, it was actually spending 4 seconds loading controllers. So every time that you were running a unit test for, I don't know, some model, it was also loading all of these controllers. The github.com monolith has like 5 million lines of code in it, so a lot of that code was in controllers and it was loading it. So I said I'd have one principle to make local development fast, and it's very simple. It is just load less code. When you're doing setting up your application development, just don't load it unless you need it. And you know, there is like other stuff. I don't want to say it's just this, but this is the big one. Like doing a lot of file and directory globbing. Like if you're hitting your API or your database, like there's other things, but I really want to say like load less code is sort of like the one thing that I see over and over again that people are violating. All right, I'm going to give you an example. This is an example from Good Job. This is my gem just to sort of like situate it in active job and background job adapters. It came out in 2020. And Good Job, I think it's pretty good. It's got a lot of features. It's a multi-threaded Postgres-based active job backend for Ruby on Rails. And one of those features was that somebody once asked for cron-style repeating jobs. So they wanted to be able to have jobs that Good Job would automatically enqueue on some sort of set schedule. And they proposed this, I want to say this is like very nice, interface where it would be really cool if you had your job class, and then inside of that job class, you could just have a nice little DSL where you're like, I want this job to repeat every hour, or like, I want it to run on the 0 minute of every hour. Like, that would be 100%, I agree, that would be a really nice way to do it, and I didn't do it that way. And this comes back to why didn't I do it that way? So what I did instead was you have this configuration hash. This is like Rails configuration. Maybe it would live in your application RB, or maybe you'd put it in a initializer, and that cron configuration lives in this hash. You put your little cron definition there, and your class, I want to point out, it is a string. It is not actually the constant myRecurringJob. It is a string that is the name of the constant. That's going to get important. The configuration doesn't live in the job. And so when good job, the way this works is like when good job runs as you're booting your application, it then goes through this configuration hash. And it looks at, okay, this is the schedule that you said, we're gonna set that up, and then like at the top of the hour, it will constantize that class string and then perform the job. So the configuration does not live with the behavior that is actually happening in the job. So this is breaking it down. Applications have a lot of files. Loading files and the constants that live in those files is really slow. Because we want to make it fast, ideally we just don't load them if we don't need it. Like this in Ruby is called like auto-loading, and you may have heard of Zeitwork, and this is not going to be a Zeitwork talk, but Zeitwork is a great library, and it also helps with auto-loading. And like in Ruby on Rails, especially, like all of this happens sort of behind the scenes if you follow Rails conventions, and you probably aren't really thinking about it. And so, you know, this talk is about not messing all of that up. This is a little bit, I mentioned sort of like in Ruby, there are two ways to sort of like load code. You can load it in a sort of like static immediate way where you write require or require relative or maybe even load. And at the moment that that gets run, it will load that code, that file with the code in it. And then auto-loading lets you define a relationship between a constant and a file, where it says, okay, don't load the file yet, but just know that when this constant is used, that only at that point in time should you go and actually load this file, because you'll find the constant definition in that file. And Zeitwork sets all of that up automatically. It's an amazing library. Zeitwork also has the ability to unload all of those constants that had been auto-loaded, and also can reload it. And that's a feature of when you are on if you're running your Rails development web server, and you like make a change and you refresh your browser page, you'll see the change in there. So that's a function of code reloading. And usually, like, requires and auto-loading are mutually exclusive. This is just a funny Matthew Draper Ruby on Rails PR comment that he's just saying, it's not hugely important if you require something that was auto-loaded, but it's kind of a smell. And so, like, I'm gonna be showing you some examples of, like, here's some things that ended up getting loaded when they shouldn't have been. And so, like, this is a really, really common theme in Rails. Just spotting things like what are the signals that something is auto-loaded? It's basically anytime you see a string or a symbol that looks like it should sort of map one-to-one with a Ruby constant, those are sort of strong signs that these are auto-loaded code. So, like, in routes where you have like this resources sort of DSL, and even like if you say controller, it's not even the name of the constant, it's like the controller name, that there's this whole other convention. And like with models, this is an example of associations where you, it'll either sort of like conventionally be the comments class, or like you can say the class name, and again, it's the string and not actually the constant. So this is not only a Rails talk. Hanami does this too. Hanami has this really cool dependency injection thing where every constant has a string key, and then you can use the string key rather than the constant, and that will Hanami will automatically manage the loading of that and injection into your Hanami class. Also, like, again, this is a Ruby sort of thing. Jared Norman wrote this really great blog post just about like doing this in rack, not even with a framework, but code reloading is like a thing you can do in Ruby. All right, so I want to give you a little more lay of the land here. So your Rails application, I sort of break it down into two columns where you have configuration, And Rails makes it really easy to identify those, that it's anything in the config directory. And then sort of below your application, configuration is all of the rail ties, the engines, and all the namespaces like active record, action controller, active job. All of those are sort of Rails framework type stuff. And then over here we have behavior. This is stuff that does stuff. And so in your application, that's everything in your app, your controllers, your helpers, your models, your services, anything you put in app lib, or if you're using lib with the autoload lib directive that I think came in Rails 7.2. And then framework behavior, Rails has this pattern where it's active record base or action controller base or active job base. The base stuff is where all of the behavior, and usually you're then subclassing that in your application. So why are these two columns helpful here? So configuration in my definitions, that's everything that gets required during boot. And then the behavior column, that only ever gets loaded in development lazily. Lazily meaning it's auto-loaded, that it's only ever loaded when it's actually needed, when it's actually called, which, if you want things to be fast, is as little as possible, only for that unit test that you're running, only for that one page on your website that you're running. And just to call out, it's actually the exact opposite in production, where your goal is we want to load everything as early as possible so that we can fork the web server. We don't want to wait until that very first request comes in and then take several seconds to load everything. So there is conflict here between what gives you a delightful development experience and what gives you an effective production experience, but we're talking about development here. And this is how a very well-ordered application, so if you do it Rails new, didn't install anything else, this would be how your application would ideally be loading, that the Rails framework configuration would load the application configuration that you've defined. And at that point, your application right here, you have fully booted. And then it's only then once you run that unit test, load up that web browser and load that singular page, that then you're going to be loading only that behavior that's necessary to load that one particular bit of behavior that you're trying to trigger. Most applications, many applications, end up disordered like this. And this is the most common problem, which is that people have initializers, things in configuration in their routes that are loading things that are over here on this column, that is loading a model, referencing some sort of helper or service, and then it sort of bounces around, and all of this happens sort of prematurely, unnecessarily, and that slows down your application. So I mentioned, back to this example, that with GitHub, that 4 seconds of loading controllers, I went and dug into this and why is it doing this? It shouldn't be doing this. And just want to give you an example of some code that we did a active support onload hook, did some puts debugging. Puts debugging is great. Puts caller just to see what called down that loaded this action controller base. And we discovered there was an initializer that was setting this property asset host. I think this actually was part of Rails generators a decade ago. And so in order to fix that, we just wrapped it with an active support load hook. So to say, don't call that until action controller base is loaded. And so this is active support lazy load hooks. Most of Rails auto-loaded constants will have a lazy load hook that's defined for it. All of those base, active job base, action controller base, all of them have one of these load hooks. This is also something that gems and libraries also use for Rails. Devise has a load hook for the Devise controller. Good job. Oh, I'm not going to touch that. Good job. We have load hooks for batches and sort of behavior that's inside of good job. View component, thank you, also has these load hooks. There's also Rails initialization events, and these also can help you sort of structure how the load order of all of your files. So you can sort of avoid some disordered loading, though it won't actually not load it. It just sort of will help you define the order that things get loaded. And I think they're really coolly names, like before configuration, after initialize. They're great. I also just want to say, this is, a lot of examples are from Rails, which is where my experience comes from, but also Hanami. This is from a grant proposal that Hanami made to the Ruby Foundation. And just going to read it. Ability to register new configuration settings on the Hanami app, hooks for extending core Hanami classes, hooks for adding logic to Hanami's app boot process. All of those are pretty familiar of what the previous slides we just talked about. That it's sort of like these things, Rails has them. If you have a large framework where you want things to load fast because you're doing auto loading, you're going to need this capability. All right, problems. So if you're using Devise, Devise has this really cool, again, DSL inside of routes where you say Devise for users. But if you actually go to definition and just keep drilling down, you'll find that it actually just constantizes that model. And that's how you end up with the moment that your routes get loaded, which until the most recent version of Rails was during boot, it would just immediately load your users model, which would load active record, which would fetch your schema, and it would add milliseconds, or if not seconds, to your boot. And this is actually an example of, I mentioned how the way that I built things in GoodJob was that I separated out configuration from behavior. This is an example in Devise, that in Devise, your configuration lives inside of your model, which is a reason why they have to, I think, constantize it and load it in order to configure the routes. So just an example of why sort of separating out configuration from behavior, though it has less locality, will help keep your app booting quickly. Rails, they screw this up all the time too. It's complicated, it's hard. So this was a problem with active record. When you loaded active record, even though it was auto-loaded, it would immediately load active job. And so this was sort of the work of teasing them apart to make sure that only when active record and active job were loaded should you go and set this property here. And it's actually pretty endemic in Rails. This was something from the most recent version of Rails, 8.1, where they did a new custom serializer thing that happens during boot, and it just has the same sort of ping-ponging around where the configuration would get loaded prematurely, or the constant would get loaded prematurely, which would cause any subsequent configuration not to get assigned. And that's usually really common because these hooks, it's you want to get all of your configuration set up and then have the constant be loaded, and then have the properties from the configuration assigned to the constant. And so if you load the constant before you have all that configuration, you won't be able to set configuration and initializers and have it work. And so this happens all the time with applications. This is an example of fixing it in Lookbook. I just love this because it's using Vernier to profile all of this. Vernier is the profiling library that has all those GitHub flame graphs and stack charts. So just Lookbook also was loading all of this stuff, and they added this lazy thing in order to speed it up. And I think it's even this example of a really small application, 35 previews and 5 pages, they were seeing a 250 millisecond increase in their boot time. All right. This is an example from Front Door Benefits, which is my application. I've been working on it full time for the past 6 months. I'm really proud of it. I think I've done a good job on it. But just for this talk, I did some profiling with Vernier. I'm going to show you that commands in a second. But even then, while I was looking at this profile, I was why are we loading VIPs, which is an image processing library? Why are we loading that during boot? I'm not processing any images in every single command I run. Fudget is a time parsing library. And even I was like, why am I loading all of my Vue components too? I think every application, even as nice as it may seem, there's probably some opportunities to make this go faster. Just to show you some stuff to do first off, just profile your application. Rails runner puts true, does the simplest thing of just booting your application, putsing true and exiting. So if it's already loading 1 or 2 seconds and you think that's fast enough, just take the win. This isn't something that it's oh yeah, you must always make it go faster. But I think most applications that I've seen, I'm that could go faster. I really want to rep John Hawthorne's Vernier profiler. It's really easy to use. Again, this is oh, you can boot your Rails application on your local development laptop, just run Vernier against it, get a flame graph, drop it onto Vernier, and see the results. I also want to say that this is a great opportunity to learn how to do profiling and how to read flame graphs, and all of these things help you immediately rather than sort of some abstract user out there on their web browser. More debugging ideas. Just want to say puts debugging is totally acceptable. Just put some stuff out, run your code, and see what it does. Gonna just blaze through here too that this is some code that it just takes every single constant, checks if they're auto-loaded, and then boots your app, and then it's okay, we booted. What of these auto-loaded constants actually got loaded? Hey, go do something about that. There's a lot of opportunities to make stuff better. All right, I am finishing up here, so please make your application boot fast in development. I think it will benefit you. Separate configuration from behavior. That'll help keeping it fast. Use load hooks. Think about how the order of your boot. Don't prematurely load stuff. And I hope these are patterns that you start seeing in your application that I've sort of primed them to. All right, I promised you cat. This is Samantha. So I help feed a group of feral cats here in Chinatown in San Francisco. Samantha recently learned about 2 weeks ago that human pets are really nice, and she really likes them. So we're going to try to get her trapped and into a foster and eventually into a forever home. If you want to see cats on Instagram, Red Carpet Cats. And then my blog, and also please, if you have questions, if you ever need help, please just ping me on Ruby Social. I guess I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm just Ben Sheldon most places. But really, I would like to help you have your application booting quickly. Thanks.